I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect Studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your counsellor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Well, it's a big hello to everyone in local government land and time for another edition of TGU, the governance update from VLGA Connect, brought to you by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. And coming up on the program today, lots of stories from Victoria, interstate and overseas to get the thoughts on from our panel who are with me now. Nick Miller from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. G'day, Nick. Welcome back. You came back for a second go.
Round two, yes. No,
Yeah.
Happy to be here, Chris. Thank you. Hi,
Can't
Julie.
be too scarred from last week.
Survived.
Indeed. No, did a terrific job. And Julie Reid is here, of course, as always, does a terrific job. Hi, Julie. Great to see you.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Nick. And Nick, have we heard from Tony? What's going on? Where is he?
Well, I did get something overnight from Tony. He was seeking to give us a bit of video story about waste collection processes, would you believe, in Spain. He's up in the Pyrenees.
Wow.
But unfortunately, the video quality was not up to scratch. But his obsessions are still there, I can see.
I'm not sure now, Nick, is it because of Tony's technical prowess or is it perhaps that the telecommunications network isn't up to scratch? What do you think?
Hard to know.
Hard to know indeed.
We do miss him, but it's a pleasure to have you with us,
Thank you.
Nick. It's nice to spread the love at Hunt and Hunt.
Having fun
Indeed.
so far.
And Tony has been peppering us with photos of his very hard slog around Europe. He's in Spain at the moment. I'm not sure if you get to see this picture, if JLF's able to put that up, and you can just see how tough he's doing it there. Our heart goes out to Tony.
We do.
All right, let's have a look at some of the stories making news this week. And we've had one of those rare cases, Nick, where a councillor has been found guilty of serious misconduct after failing to comply with an arbiter's directions in relation to a finding of misconduct. This has happened at La Trobe. It's Councillor Melissa Ferguson, who is now serving a 1-month suspension.
Indeed, Chris. Round two, as you say. The original round arose from a complaint by Councillor Tracy Lund, and that regarded 40 tweets about LGBTQIA plus issues that Councillor Ferguson had put out. And the first arbiter, as you referred to, Chris, found that many of these were offensive, disrespectful to trans people, in that it inferred that trans people were pedophiles, grooming children and so on, were disrespectful to other members of the community, discriminatory, and didn't support the council's obligation to achieve and promote gender equality. So in the first round, the arbiter ordered Councillor Ferguson to give a verbal apology to council meeting, to give an apology on Twitter. Both of those apologies in the orders were required to be unreserved, and also to attend training. So Councillor Ferguson then went ahead and made a statement at a council meeting. And what that statement was simply a restatement of the paragraph from the orders of the arbiter. The Twitter apology was on exactly the same terms. And Councillor Lund, unsurprisingly, submitted that these so-called apologies failed to comply with the arbiter's orders. And her statement and tweet merely recited what the arbiter had said in the orders and weren't genuine apologies. And the panel agreed, unsurprisingly, with that. It found that no apology had been given. Councillor Ferguson didn't speak in the first person at all, so she didn't say anything along the lines of, "I apologise." And instead, she simply referred to herself in the third person, whilst reciting perversely the arbiter's decision. The statement gave no context. It didn't refer to the subject matter of the first decision and how the tweets were found to be offensive, disrespectful, discriminatory, and bringing discredit onto the council. And so it bore none of the hallmarks of an apology. And Councillor Ferguson, the suggestion was, the finding was, made no admission of error, no expression of regret. So then the panel, of course, unsurprisingly, in light of that logic, found that Councillor Ferguson had engaged in serious misconduct and failed to comply with a direction from the arbiter. Interestingly, Councillor Ferguson also made a statement that she had complied with every other direction, including participating in all training and counselling she'd been directed to undertake, and that was found to be factually incorrect. So that was part of the mix as well. So ultimately, the panel reprimanded. That's the first thing that they did, Councillor Ferguson. And in reprimanding her, they said that reprimanding is a condemnation of the conduct. It suspended her for 1 month, as she said, and it required her to undertake further training. Now, there was debate on the council's decision, and the panel's decision about the length of the suspension. And presently, the maximum suspension is 12 months, as we know, in Victoria. And in considering what was appropriate, the panel said that we really needed to have a deterrence here. And it said so in the context where the councillor had shown no insight as to her conduct at all. And this was the third instance of her misconduct in recent times. So ultimately 1 month was decided to be the suspension period. Sounds fairly moderate, but one can imagine that if there's anything that comes before a panel going forward, then we could be looking at a longer period of suspension. So an interesting one, a sort of respect for process reinforcement, I think, again, Chris and Julie.
Yes, Nick, and I notice in the panel's decision they use words like false, misleading, deliberate, willful. They really didn't pull their punches in their condemnation of the behaviour, did they?
Indeed, it's a strong panel decision. It's well argued. It's well put together. I think it's fairly straightforward.
All right, there you go. That's happened at La Trobe. The council has tabled that panel decision at their meeting this week, which means that 1 month suspension starts from that date. A couple of other conduct matters in the news this week at Brimbank Council, which is one of a handful of councils that have municipal monitors in place. The council has revealed that it's received advice from the Minister for Local Government that concerns have been raised by the monitors in an interim report about a number of governance-related issues. And Julie, the Mayor there, Ranka Rasic, has said she's impressing upon councillors the importance of abiding by the standards of conduct.
Yes, that's right, Chris. We don't have much information, but the Mayor has actually put some information on the website. This was a letter that was received from the Minister for Local Government on the 29th of May, and it was in relation to those governance matters and about the municipal monitors. And the Minister raises concerns, particularly in relation to the failures to give effect to the overarching governance principles of Section 9 of the Local Government Act, failures to take into account supporting principles under the Act as well, and also failures by councillors to perform the role in accordance with Section 28 of the Act. But it also mentions about behaviour that may be inconsistent, Chris, with the standards of conduct in councillors' code of conduct. So they're the concerns that the Minister has raised. The Mayor, Councillor Rasic, has said that they're taking these matters really seriously, and they do have to provide a response, Chris, to the Minister by the 30th of June in terms of what action they're going to take to address and remedy some of these concerns. So it will be interesting to see how they're approaching that. And obviously we want that to be a successful term for the monitors. They came in on the 12th of Feb. They come out on the 31st of December. So they have got some time to be able to rectify some of these issues. But obviously it'll be interesting to see what happens after the election as well. There's
well, that's right. Yeah, hence that term through to December. So it's Janet Dorr and Penelope Holloway who were appointed as monitors there at Brimbank. And Nick, I'm not sure if you want to weigh in on this. An interim report and a letter from the Minister partway through a monitor's term is a little bit unusual.
Well, it shows it's very much a work in progress there, and there's work to do. As we've been saying, 6 months to go. So hopefully further progress can occur over that period.
All right, so that's at Brimbank. And Hume Council's been in the news too for a proposed change to its governance rules. So it's apparently looking at the possibility of identifying councillors as parties who can be removed from a council meeting for disruptive behaviour. This has been reported in Sunbury Life. Again, Nick, unusual to have a governance rule actually spell out that provision would apply to councillors as well as members of the gallery, for example?
Yes, so the way it works, Chris, and I think in some of the notes you was noting Section 28, which Julie's just referred to in the context of Brimbank. Section 19 of the Act, which is specific powers of the Mayor, it says quite clearly that a Mayor can direct a councillor to leave a council meeting if the behaviour of the councillor is preventing the council from conducting its business. But that section is subject to any procedures or limitations in the governance rules. And here there are limitations in the governance rules because it says that this power of removal doesn't apply in respect of councillors. So the plan, as you've outlined, is to change the governance rules and remove the exclusion of councillors from the removal power. And I understand that Hume Council is going about the process of changing the governance rules in the required manner. And if that's the case, then those governance rules might be amended. We've talked about 28, and Section 28 is the one that's the sort of fundamental role of a councillor to participate in decision-making. And that's fundamental and some primacy in the legislation. But there are qualifiers in that section. And those qualifiers refer, for example, to the importance of a councillor acknowledging and supporting the role of the mayor, acting in accordance with the governance standards, which makes sense, obviously, and complying with council procedures for good governance. So there is a qualification there. So I guess my thought is that provided Hume Council complies with the procedure, it's perhaps a little unusual, but nonetheless, I think that will be perfectly lawful.
And interesting, Julie, that this is a move that's actually been prompted by council laws after some recent disruptive behaviour in the chamber.
Yes, that's right. And so, good on them for having a look at their governance rules and looking at what they can do in response to what's been happening. So, it means that they're, open to change if they feel that is necessary. So, interesting one to watch, I think.
A question of councillors being accountable for their own behaviour, I would have thought.
Yeah, so true, Nick.
Yeah.
All right, we will keep an eye on that and see what happens as that process runs its course. Bit of a beat up this week in the Geelong Advertiser about the borough of Queenscliff. There's a story down there where the borough, I think administratively, not through a council formal decision, has refused permission for a coffee van to operate at a local football netball club. This has led to a bit of a pile-on online with people suggesting that the borough, based on this, it cannot manage its affairs and should be amalgamated into Greater Geelong or replaced with a new Bellarine Council, Bellarine Peninsula Council. Jeff Kennett's weighed in on this. Of course, he presided over the amalgamation of councils back in the early 90s. He said there was some particular local considerations at the time to carve the borough of Queenscliff out. And he said you wouldn't make a decision based on whether they've given a coffee van permission to operate or not. Is that a fair take, do you think, Nick?
Look, I think it is. But I think if we just step back from this a little bit hard to work out exactly what's going on, but it looks as if what's happened here is that it's a local laws permit rather than a planning permit. Of course, if we're in planning land, objections on the basis of competition, which is the suggestion as to what was motivating the declined permit in this instance. Not sure about that, but that's the suggestion. If we're in planning land, competitive objections would not be taken into account as part of the planning process. So that's a little bit more context.
It's interesting in the fact that, I suspect that, a lot of the businesses, and particularly down in Queenscliff, they're all going to be going through, tough times when people are pulling back and not spending as much money, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I think that the competition thing down in small towns like that is probably going to be the driver for these kinds of issues, where they might be getting, local competition. You don't know whether or not it's because the van is coming from outside of the town or whatever, that then creates that issue in that small town competition sense. So just from a practical point of view, I can, probably appreciate and understand how the businesses might react to something like this locally. And then the council then jumps on the back of that to ensure that it's listening to its community.
You'd want a bit more substance before you go suggesting it means the council needs to be eradicated, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Rhys Thomas was telling me he recalls Jeff Kennett speaking or being asked about the decision to preserve Queenscliff as a borough back then. And apparently he was asked this at a local government conference and he said, well, he was allowed one mistake.
Bit of a churchill comment, that one, isn't it?
You can imagine him saying that.
And it's it's interesting, Chris, because I've always thought, because it's the borough of Queenscliff, that it's steeped in so much history and tradition, that they didn't want to break that. I've always thought that that was the reason why, that it has its own unique kind of flavour and unique heritage, etc. So that's what I say, but who knows? Who
I've
knows?
I've always heard that it was very, very much a political decision because of some of the
Right.
people that lived or owned property there that exerted some influence on the process. But we're nearly 30 years on, so it probably doesn't really matter at this stage.
Yeah,
A
that's
bit
right.
of very sad news, tragic news this week. You might have followed in the news. A gentleman went missing while hiking in the Northern Territory on the Larapinta Trail. His body was found earlier this week. It turns out that it was Alistair Thompson, 64 years of age, who was a councillor at Strathbogie Shire during the 2016 to 2020 term and was a current member of that council's audit and risk committee. So, just a shock to obviously the family and friends of Alistair, but also to the Strathbogie Shire community. And we send our thoughts and condolences out to them all.
Yeah, we do, Chris. It's very, very sad. And in actual fact, the administrator, Peter Stevenson, has expressed deep sadness at the loss of Mr. Thompson and extended heartfelt condolences to his family and friends. And Mr. Stevenson said that Alistair's contributions, expertise, kindness, and unwavering commitment to good governance had left a lasting legacy for Strathbogie. So very sad. And we do give a big shout out to Alistair and his amazing work in local government, and condolences to his family.
Yes, Valet Alistair Thompson. Some happier news. 10 Victorian councils have been recognised with a Magalee Award, which is from Reconciliation Victoria, after their awards ceremony last week. Ballarat, Greater Dandenong, Hobsons Bay, Hume, Latrobe, Marybeck, Mount Alexander, Strathbogie and Whittlesea. And Wyndham, which picked up an award for their 41-metre high mural on the Holiday Inn in Werribee, which is magnificent, Julie.
Oh, it is magnificent, Chris. And so if you're out that way, go and have a look at it. There's a beaut photo on the website, the Wyndham website. It's actually the facade of the Hunter Building on Sinnott Street in Werribee. They went through significant consultation with the Bunurong traditional owners and local First Nations communities, and then went to a public expression of interest process. And then the council appointed Victorian artist Tommy Day, who represented by Mamam, to design and install this 41-metre high tall mural. So look, it's also Tommy Day, aka Jiri Jiri, incorporated a range of elements to present cultural perspective and expression in this unique artwork as a response to the themes and cultural input from the community. So have a look at it online, and get out there if you can, if you're out that way, and have a look, because it's really, really impressive and definitely award-winning material.
Look, it's great to see
Excellent.
that level of collaboration and engagement. And I know from firsthand experience that Wyndham does place a great priority on that, engaging with the Indigenous community. So it's great to see that recognition.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Here's an update on a story that did draw our attention last year. The city of Stonington came in for some criticism online and through the media for not using the word Christmas in their festive decorations and activities. They were using the term "make merry." Well, the council has formally decided this week to revert to using "Merry Christmas" in its festive season messaging. Julie?
Yes, Chris. And I was pleased to see this, in the sense that at least they've got a resolution after what happened last year. Christmas is always a difficult time for councils, and it's good that they're getting in early. I know some people celebrate Christmas in July, so we
True.
might even have some celebrations in July this year. But yeah, council's overwhelming support was there for return to Merry Christmas at the 3rd of June council meeting. So, and that was following, a significant feedback from the community and local business associations. So good on them. They're actually also going to mount a traditional Christmas wreath on Malvern Town Hall and light up the building. So that'll be a nice one to go and have a look at if you're in that area at the time. but they are definitely back into Merry Christmas. But they have said, and which I think is really important, that they absolutely embrace diversity in their city. But this one was pretty straightforward decision for the council. And they've thanked everybody for giving their views to help them make the decision.
I'm not surprised how that consultation ended up. So Merry Christmas. Christmas is back in
Yes.
Stonington. I wanted to share this with you. I just loved this. You probably know I scan council news pages a lot to find out what's going on around the traps. And I think Swan Hill Council has had some updates to their website, because the link that I had sent me to this page, which says, "Are you lost? Sorry, the page you were looking for could not be found." And then it's taken the opportunity to place some lost pets photos and messages on the page. It says, "I'm lost too. Any chance you know my owner?" I just thought this was a wonderful, wonderful way to highlight some lost pets in the community on a council's website.
Oh, it's so gorgeous. It's got this gorgeous little dog and these little cats in there, and it's sort of and it's got the postcode of where they were found,
Yeah,
and it just that whole link between the error page on the website and the lost cats
yeah.
is really quite good, isn't it? Really
That's
quite
clever. Yeah,
creative. They're
yeah.
really
I
creative.
wonder if
So
they've set up some more broken links than they would ordinarily have, just to have this out there a bit more.
That's a good point, Nick, because if you don't have a broken link, you won't see that
Exactly.
page otherwise. But no,
yeah.
I was chuffed with that. I thought that was terrific. Well done, Swan Hill. I'm not sure whether they've picked that up from somewhere else, but I thought it was worth a mention and a highlighting on the program.
Yeah,
Of course, I've updated
definitely.
my link now, so I probably won't see that page again, unfortunately. All right, we're going to pause, Julie and Nick, and come back with some interstate stories and a couple of interesting little overseas stories very shortly. But it's time for the weekly appearance from Rhys Thomas. It's time for Rhys's Piece. That's what we're calling it this week. It might change next week, depending on any submissions we get from the audience. Hello, Rhys Thomas from the VLGA.
G'day, Chris, and happy National Donut Day.
Is it? Oh, thank you. I didn't know that.
It is. I think it's a scheme cooked up by the big donut industry, but I'm on their mailing list and I know all about it.
I'm not surprised. Not about you being on the mailing list, but who's behind it. I'll be rushing out for a donut as soon as we're done. Rhys, this is our new regular segment where you update us on things that are particularly VLGA relevant, and of course, we've got a lot coming up in that sense with elections around the corner. Any update though on the reform bill that's in the Parliament?
Well, I do have an update, Chris, because as closely as I was watching Parliament last week, and obviously I talked all about it, I did overlook something which was pretty significant.
Yeah.
Which was, as soon as the bill passed the lower house, they sent a message to the Legislative Council, and the bill was introduced that same night and had its first and second reading.
Oh.
That means a couple of things. First, it suggests the government's pretty confident that the bill will pass the Legislative Council probably unamended, because they haven't left themselves time for negotiation. And second, it makes it possible that it'll pass in the next sitting week, which is 8 to 20 June. That's all good news for the sector, I think, because the sector's looking for some certainty, and there's certainly a lot to do before the October election.
So I know some parts of the sector are hoping perhaps for some last minute changes on certain things, and taking our guide from what perhaps the Greens and the opposition were saying in the lower house. Are you suggesting perhaps that that's not going to be a factor in the passing of the bill?
Well, the indication is that the government's not planning on that.
Right.
But of course, the government doesn't control the Legislative Council, so its plans may have to change. A lot of the detail, of course, is in the regulations, and that's still to be seen.
Yeah.
But I'm pleased to let you know that the VLGA has been invited to participate in the steering group that will be working to oversee and develop those regulations. So our Chief Executive, Catherine Arndt, will be participating in that process. So if anyone in the sector that's got feedback or suggestions can reach out to us, and we'll feed that into the process.
Excellent. All right, that's a good thought. Now, the close of the electoral roll, just 2 months away now. This is important if you want to vote, but it's also important, Rhys, if you want to be a candidate.
It certainly is. And of course, we're assuming that the bill passes, because that will move the date forward to the 7th of August, 2 months from today. I'm told that at every council election, a candidate somewhere turns up at the returning office to register to become a candidate, only to find out that they're not on the electoral roll.
Oh, how embarrassment.
Yes, it is awkward. So anyone that's considering being a candidate, the very first thing they need to do is work that out.
Right.
So I thought I might talk a little bit about who's on the electoral roll, how you get on, and
Yep.
there's a few anomalies in it as well. And I thought I might point those out. A couple of
Yeah,
ones.
do tell. Mm.
So I'll start by saying I'm not talking about the City of Melbourne. They have their own rules and they're quite different. And the City of Melbourne actually has a great website that they've put together, a special website on the election. So anyone looking to stand or vote there should check that out. And of course, I'm not talking about Moira Council either, because they're still in administration and won't be going to election this year. So anyone that's thinking about becoming a councillor in Moira should contact the council and ask about the innovative leadership program that they'll be rolling out in their community later this year. So
because they don't go back to election to 2028, do they?
2028, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. So with those two exceptions, I'll talk about how the electoral roll goes together. There's two kinds of voters, what we call state enrolled voters and council enrolled voters. So state enrolled voters is most of us. In fact, it's 90% of all voters in Victoria, and they're people that are registered on the state electoral roll. So if you vote in state or federal elections at the residence where you live, you will receive a ballot paper for council elections. There's nothing you need to do. That just happens automatically. All you need to do is fill out your ballot paper and send it back. So you can check to make sure that your enrolment is still active, and you can check on the VEC website. So that brings me to the first of the anomalies. When you do check your enrolment online, it'll tell you what council you're in, and if your council has wards, it'll tell you what ward you're in. But it'll show you what ward you're in today. And so if your wards have changed, or your electoral structure has changed, or even just the ward boundaries have changed, then the VEC's website may show you in one ward when in fact you'll receive a ballot pack for a different ward, because the current wards exist right up to and including election day itself.
Oh, so they won't be updated before the election actually kicks off?
No, because the VEC website is a moment in time. Now,
right.
There's also information on the VEC website about where the new boundaries are, but it's a little bit more complicated. You've got to locate your council, see if it's had an electoral review, open their report, look at their maps. Lots of councils themselves have more up-to-date information on their own websites. It's also worth checking there. So that's state enrolled voters, and as I said, that's 90% of us. The other kind of voter is called a council enrolled voter, and there's three types of those. There's what's called owner ratepayers. So they're mostly property owners who don't live in a municipality. So if you own an investment property or a holiday house, then you're likely to be an owner ratepayer. But it does also include people who are resident owners, so they do live in the house, but they're not on the electoral roll for some reason, mostly because they're not an Australian citizen. The second group of council enrolled voter is an occupier ratepayer. So these people occupy and pay rates in a property, but they don't own the property. So they're normally occupiers of properties under a commercial lease, where the terms of the lease mean that they have to pay all the outgoings. And the third group is a representative of a corporation. So if you own a business that owns a property, then you can vote on behalf of that business. Now, I should say you can't get two votes in any election. So if you are in multiple categories, or if you're a resident and you also own an investment property in the same municipality, you will only get one vote, and it'll be at the place where you live. Candidates, unlike voters must vote in the ward that they're enrolled in. Candidates can stand in any ward. They don't actually have to be enrolled in that ward. They do have to be enrolled in that council.
Yeah.
A little bit complicated. You with me?
Yes, yep, following you. And some of this has been tweaked, has it not, under Local Government Act 2020?
It has. And I'll touch on that because I did promise you a couple of anomalies. So here's the other one. When the Act was introduced in 2020, it introduced mandatory voting for everyone for the first time. Because until then, if you'd been one of those absentee landowners, you could simply throw your ballot paper away and it wouldn't matter. You weren't required to vote. Only residents were required to vote. That's now changed. But they've made a change, which is that investment property owners, while they're required to vote, they're not required to enrol. So there's now a
Mm.
need for anyone who is a absentee landowner. They have to actually contact their council to enrol. Even if you were enrolled at the last election, you must contact them and enrol again. So councils are
Okay.
communicating with their residents those people about that. So you'll get some information from your council. But the anomaly is that there are two councils, Casey and Whittlesea, that didn't have an election in 2020. So their first election is actually this year.
Yeah.
So in those places, the owner ratepayers are actually enrolled automatically. They don't have to enrol.
Oh.
And the catch is that the transition arrangement, which made that possible, doesn't actually apply to mandatory voting. So they must vote. So that makes it significant. What it means is if you're an owner of an investment property in Casey or Whittlesea, and perhaps you've been an owner of that property for many years, you will be required for the first and last time this year only. It's an anomaly. So
Wow.
in the past, you could simply throw away your ballot pack when you got it. And in the future, you can simply choose not to enrol with council. But this year and this year alone, you will be automatically enrolled, you will receive a ballot pack, and you must post it back. Otherwise,
Wow.
you get a fine. So it's quite likely that in those two councils, there'll be many people contacted after the election and given a please explain as to why they didn't vote.
Well,
So,
hopefully they're paying attention and that doesn't happen to too many people.
well, hopefully they are, but many people, and we experienced this in a city of Melbourne, a review of a City of Melbourne election some time ago, which is that a lot of people in that position actually don't receive the mail from the council at all. They have a real estate agent or some other agent who is getting their mail for them. And at a previous election, a number of real estate agents misunderstood the rules and actually voted on behalf of the landowners, which is not lawful.
Yeah.
So the VEC did some communication about that and will do again this year. So that's it for elections. When we get a bit closer to when the ballots go out, I'm going to talk to you again little bit about how to make sure your vote's counted, what excuses are valid for not voting. And I've even got some information which is interesting about how many people write rude words or draw rude pictures on the ballot paper.
All right.
And I'll talk all about that when we get a bit closer to voting day.
Look forward to that. That was surprisingly interesting. Thank you, Reece. And as you know, as they say in the classics, the devil's in the detail, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, all right. Look forward to more of those pearls of wisdoms as the election gets a little bit closer. How's the VLGA board election tracking?
Well, it's much more simple. You don't have to enrol. You don't have to do anything. All the councillors from the VLGA member councils have received communication from us with their ballot instructions, and many of them have voted already. Voting's open for about another week and a half. I think there's 8 candidates contesting for 2 places, so that's good news. It's always encouraging when you get a strong interest in an organisation like ours. And if you haven't got your information or you can't locate your email, contact us and we'll help you track it down.
Okay. And I noticed that you're delivering a lunch and learn session coming up on the election period consideration for councillors, particularly those who are seeking re-election, Reece.
I am, Chris, and last week when TGU went to air, I was conducting one of the sessions on managing behaviour in council meetings in the lead up to council elections, and that went quite well. But our next one is at the end of the month, and as you say, it's looking specifically at the rules that affect councillors during the election period, and because there are a few tips and tricks in it, and there's some breaches of the Act that a councillor could inadvertently do just by using the wrong information, using the wrong photograph, or there's a number of other things. So I'll be talking about that at our lunch and learn lesson and session, and you can register on our website for that.
That sounds like a must attend for councillors at VLGA member councils. It is a member event, isn't it?
It is a member only event. That's right, Chris.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you, Reece. Really enjoyed your piece this week. I hope you're enjoying the newfound stardom that comes with appearing on TGU, and we'll see you next week.
No worries, Chris. Thanks for having me.
So, Nick and Julie, I'm not sure on your thoughts there. We're going to see what sort of fits in terms of a title. I've got one, as I said to Reece, for next week, and we're interested in hearing from viewers and listeners on what you think would be a good title for Reece's section. So we called it Policy Pulse, I think, last week. Boring. We called it Reece's Piece this week. So who knows what we'll come up with in the future. You let me know, both of you, will you, if you have
Yeah.
some ideas?
Yeah,
Yes.
any suggestions from our listeners
Yes.
at this stage, Chris?
Yes.
Any
We
country yet?
haven't as yet. No, it's been
No.
deathly silenced, Julie.
Come on, listeners, give us your thoughts.
So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay, let's have a look a bit further afield. Interesting story out of New South Wales, where a councillor at Upper Hunter Shire was declared unelected, if you like, sort of removed from office after not attending 3 meetings in a row and not having a leave of absence. She challenged this in court and lost. Nick, no surprise.
Indeed. No, no real surprise. And the council is pleased with the outcome. Council has sought hard. This is the Upper Hunter Shire Council, just over the Great Dividing Range from where my parents have a farm in Liverpool Plains. And so she didn't front up for these 3 meetings, as you said, Chris, without leave. She was then sacked from her role as a councillor and sought a review to the New South Wales equivalent of VCAT, which is called NCAT, QCAT, NCAT, VCAT.
Yeah.
The council, interestingly, saved taxpayers, ratepayers, funds by representing itself at the NCAT hearing and managed to have its original decision upheld. So that's a good result. It's surprising. I don't know the backstory here. Why would someone not seek to put in leave of absence, but then be upset when they're removed? I just would be interested to hear a little bit more about that, and I don't have that background.
Yeah, of course. There's always different factors at play here. We've had some examples in Tasmania recently where councillors have been removed. Sometimes there's political games being played. Sometimes, in one case, there was a bereavement, and the councillor, who was ultimately re-elected, by the way, at a by-election, had been removed because the Act suggested that she must, but she was off grieving the passing of a spouse. So you can sort of understand in that sort of situation. And then we've had a South Australian example recently too, where 2 councillors have been removed after not attending meetings and not complying with various conduct breach findings as well. So not unusual. It seems to apply pretty similarly across different states, Nick, those provisions.
Indeed. And look, it's good sense in the rules. Almost always a case of have regard to the circumstances. As you say, bereavements is one thing. Political games is a completely different one.
But the legislation generally leaves no room for discretion when those triggers have been met, if you like.
That seems to be the case in New South Wales. So,
Yeah.
And look, there it is. I mean, the council had to make the decision to sack her. So in other words, it's not 3 strikes and you're out. It's 3 strikes and council makes a resolution. So it's at that point where the council might take into account other factors that you've been mentioning, Chris.
Okay, a couple of quick updates from interstate. We mentioned, I think, the termination of the employment of the CEO of Liverpool City Council, John Ajaka, at a council meeting by one vote. The vote of the mayor was used to pass that termination. I notice a group of councillors there have lodged a rescission motion and are suggesting that due process hasn't been followed. They want that decision to be reviewed at the next council meeting. This is all happening while the Office of Local Government is looking into some issues at Liverpool, and those councillors are suggesting that the mayor is a party or a factor in those events, those investigations, and therefore has, in their view, a conflict of interest in the decision to terminate the CEO. So we'll be hearing more about that one. The Mayor of Townsville was a no-show this week at a council meeting on Wednesday, at which the council moved a motion of no confidence. Ultimately, they've called on him to resign. They're calling on the state government to take action. The local government minister there, Megan Scanlon, is considering her options around suspension or dismissal. We're unlikely to see a decision there while a Crime and Corruption Commission investigation is ongoing. So until that happens, the Townsville mayor has taken a leave of absence on mental health grounds. So that story seems to develop a little more every day, guys. Yes, and another one from Darwin, where a councillor there has been found guilty of conduct breaches 9 times in 8 months. So 9 different breaches in 8 months. The big story here is Amy Owen from Darwin, who is banned from council premises and physically attending council meetings because of what's seen as behaviour that is unsafe or of concern to the organisation, she is refusing to comply with any of the sanctions that have been imposed. I mean, how can she still be a councillor in those circumstances, Nick?
Oh, I don't know.
It is just remarkable. I don't understand or don't have background on the regulatory setup there in the top end, but one would imagine that to the extent that the local government minister at the territory level has powers, they'd be thinking very seriously about exercising those. She's, as you say, flat out rejecting it. She says, "You're not my boss. The people elected me are my boss. Only they can remove me," and so on. And look, it's a serious matter. I mean, at one level, we might think it's amusing, and another croc story or similar from the top end. But really, it's about respect for local government, and we want people to take local government seriously. And it's hard for the public and the community at large to do that when councillors are failing to recognise the regime to which they're subject, and for good reason. So it's disturbing, and I look forward to seeing some regulatory action on that front.
Yeah.
Truly extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, it is extraordinary, and particularly because it's related to being discourteous, inappropriate conduct towards staff, engaging in bullying and other breaches of that kind of nature. So these are high risk areas that that can really, really impact on the organisation. So I just cannot believe her absolute refusal to undertake any of these, which were, we're really just talking about some training, some written apologies, maybe going to a bit of mediation, so obviously the council would support her in going through those exercises in terms of, ensuring that they're well conducted, etc. But I just can't believe it. I think what Nick said about the reputation of local government and the reputation of councils up there, is really important, and this is really going to affect that. Really affect it.
Yeah, but there's been some pretty full-on headlines over the months on this in the NT News and the like. I understand that she's running for, must be territory level office as well.
Right. Okay.
And there is a certain portion of the electorate in the top end that sees themselves as frontier pioneers, and maverick behaviour such as this has some appeal to that portion of the electorate. Perhaps that's what she's pitching for.
Yeah, you could be right. All right, let's go to Italy because we're so jealous of Tony Raunik, who's in Spain, which, is not that far from Italy, of course. There's a village there called Ingria, which is going to election this weekend. There's only 46 residents, I think 20-something non-resident voters as well. But there's 30 candidates, Nick, for this election in the village of Ingria. 30 out of 46.
Governance in Italy, eh? And I saw that the mother of the current mayor, who thought he would be up for another term, she's decided to vote with the women's ticket and is opposing his re-election.
But it's a family tradition too, because his grandfather, so I assume her mother, of course it could be his father's father, was the mayor there for 30 years.
So they've approached local government from a very different perspective in Italy, and perhaps to a certain extent in France as well. And obviously Jeff Kennett would have some amalgamating to do were he to get his hands on the local government systems in either of these two countries. But look, it's an interesting one to see. It's great to see that people are participating. I was interested after he learnt that he'd lost his mother's support, and he was asked what level of whether that would affect family gatherings, and he was sure that it wouldn't. So I hope he's speaking sincerely there. Excellent stuff.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Fun conversations around the dinner table, no doubt. The Guardian has reported on that one. I notice as we record this, there's an election in Limerick in Ireland as well for their first ever directly elected mayor. So we're keeping an eye on that one. And let's go to New York before we finish, because I know you're heading there later this year, I think, Julie, aren't you? And if you want to make sure you're not caught short, the mayor of New York is helping out with a new strategy called, get this, You're in Luck. you are
Yes,
in
Chris.
luck.
Oh,
Yes.
no.
It's all
I'm
about
going to be
public bath.
there, and
All
I'm
about
going to
public
be in
bathroom
luck.
access.
Yeah. So Mayor Eric Adams has just announced that the city is embarking on a new effort to expand access to public bathrooms across 5 boroughs in New York City. So exciting space for them. It's interesting. Didn't we hear not long ago that in the UK, they're reducing the amount of public bathrooms that they're actually going to have. So maybe there's an oversupply in the UK and there's an undersupply in the US. So over the next 5 years, they're going to be installing these 46 new restrooms. They're going to be installing a lot of these automatic, the automatic restrooms that are self-cleaning, which is interesting. So it's interesting. They were saying that, they've only got 1,000 restrooms to serve a population of 8 million people. So you'll be hanging on for a while to get access to the current
queuing, no doubt.
Yeah, and look, it's interesting because this is the big city. The big city issues is around this health hazards of public defecation and urination that's happening, without access in a quick way to public toilets. And the same issue was happening in Westminster in central London. They put up in pop-up urinals to try and resolve the issue, particularly late at night when people were desperate. So I can understand why they're moving in this direction if they have an undersupply. But it was an interesting story. But the one thing that took my my interest as well, Chris, is that there's a fantastic app that you can use, and it's called Got to Go NYC. And so I'll be downloading that app before I leave. So then when I'm stuck in New York City and I got to go, then I'll be relying on that app. So
I didn't think that through where that story might go when I added on to the list. To hear you, Julie, be the first person on TGU to use the word defecation, I think is a moment in time. Thank you for that. We're talking about a cleverly titled campaign. So You're in Luck, I thought was pretty good from New York. Valencia, Spain is putting solar panels through local cemeteries to turn cemeteries into solar farms, which I thought was an innovative idea. And they've called that RIP, which stands for Requiem in Power. So I thought that was quite clever too.
I hope the publicity generates support for it. You can imagine some people might object to cemeteries being used in that way. I think we should be doing what we can to use the space that we have to create more power. But some people of a more traditional bent might be concerned.
Yeah, good thought, good point, Nick. All right, I think we've reached the end. I think that's enough. That's enough for this week. Julie, we've got to go.
We got to go.
Very good, Chris.
Thank you, Nick Miller from Hunt & Hunt Lawyers, and thank you to Hunt & Hunt Lawyers for their support for TGU. Thank you, Julie Reid. I hope you both will join me again next week for more discussion.
Look forward to it.
Certainly will.
And that's our program for today. Thanks for watching and listening. Subscribe on YouTube or make sure we're in your podcast feed to make sure you don't miss future episodes of TGU from VLGA Connect.